Well, let me really quickly check here. Yep, it's just still those two. There is Tara. Hi, Tara. Tara's just joining us as well. Okay. Do you have a device? Wait, yeah, got to go downstairs and get it. Sorry. There's another cart in there, but I'm not sending anybody in that training. Just not a good idea. Okay. Um, Welcome to the In Pursuit of Unhappiness writing lab. And we want to make sure that you are ready to write the essay. The essay is one of those assignments that really does need to come in on time because it gets automatically assigned as a peer review, which I find is very valuable when people are looking at each other's. It's just one focus point. It's not, you're not expected to grade it like I would. So, but it has to be there in Canvas in order for it to be assigned. So that's why if the first draft essay does not come in on time and it doesn't get assigned as a peer review, you're going to lose 15% on the draft and 15% on the peer review. But other than that, there's no other points that are taken off. Okay, the way the prompt is written for this module is the authors of the module went to the original source that McMahon used when he was quoting Mill. And so they put in a little bit more context so that you'd have a little bit more to kind of play with when you're actually writing the essay. So let's take a look at this quote first. John Stuart Mill wrote, "I never indeed wavered in the conviction that happiness is the test of all rules of conduct and the end of life. But I now thought that this end was only to be attained by not making it the direct end. Those only are happy, I thought, who have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness and the happiness of others, on the improvement of mankind, even on some art or pursuit, followed not as a means, but as itself an ideal end. Aiming thus at something else, they find happiness by the way. The enjoyments of life, such was my theory, are sufficient to make it a pleasant thing. When they are taken en passant, without being made a principal object. Once make them so, and they are immediately felt to be insufficient. They will not bear a scrutinizing examination. Ask yourself whether you are happy and you cease to be so. The only chance is to treat, not happiness, but some end external to it as the purpose of life. Let your self-consciousness, your scrutiny, your self-interrogation exhaust themselves on that, and if otherwise fortunately circumstanced, you will inhale happiness with the air you breathe, without dwelling on it or thinking about it, without either forestalling it in imagination or putting it to flight by fatal questioning. This theory now became the basis of my philosophy of life, and I still hold to it as the best theory for all those who have but a moderate degree of sensibility and a capacity for enjoyment. That is, for the great majority of mankind." That's quite a lot, isn't it? Big mouthful. So what you're being asked to do in the writing prompt is to explain John Stuart Mill's argument. Not McMahon's, but John Stuart Mill's, and discuss the ways in which you agree or disagree with his views. Support your position by providing reasons and examples from your own observations, experiences, or readings. So the first thing we want to look at that we need to do is to actually explain that argument. So let's go back to the actual quote. And when you see something like this and it's very rich with vocabulary and you're kind of going like, I'm already lost. What I like to do is I like to try and pick out some phrases that really jump out at me. So looking at this, what are some things that jump out at you?
Quotes?
Yeah, just little pieces.
those only are happy after have their mind fixed on some object other than their own happiness.
And why did that jump out at you? What are you reminded of?
Seems like you'd be more happy if you focus on yourself.
Mm-hmm. Good.
So would you write it out?
You can, yeah, because these are everything that we do now is really going to help you in the process of when you're doing the writing. Because, like, if the first thing you have to do is explain the argument, you got to know what it is, and so it's your explanation of what that argument is. So, and sometimes it does help. What did I just say? It's good if you can write it down. So, yeah. Other phrases that jump out at you. I'm looking at, because this is a really tough one, let your self-consciousness, your scrutiny, your self-interrogation exhaust themselves on that. That meaning the purpose of life. What does that mean? Do you recognize? Go ahead.
It's not like essentially like the goal. That's not what's making you happy. Like the journey is what's making you happy.
Yeah. Where what are the clues that give you that?
Because it says your own scrutiny, your own exhaust. That's just you doing your everyday stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you think about it, like if you dwell on anything else besides that, you're just like, what's the point?
Right. And if you're concerned with the immediate, whatever the immediate is, you don't have time to sit and dwell on, am I happy or not? Have you ever been in a position where you have questioned your own happiness?
I have really never even thought about my own happiness.
Okay.
To do stuff.
But Tara, you have. Yeah. What conclusion do you usually come to if you say, am I happy?
I usually just say to myself, if I'm happy, I'll feel happy. If I'm not happy, I can't feel happy. And I just need to, I need to do what I need to. I need to do what I need for a while if I want to get back to the good feelings again.
Right. Especially the part where he says, ask yourself if you are happy and you what? Cease to be so. So if you have to stop and think about it, that must mean that something's wrong. If you're continually interacting with other people and with life, you don't think about being happy because you probably are. But as soon as you stop, why do I not feel happy anymore? Then it becomes, that self-examination of, well, something's changed, but the only thing you have control over is yourself. Any other things that are jumping out at you from this passage that you think, this reminds me of something?
Well, hello?
Hi, Mr. Short.
Hi. Okay, if you look about 6 lines down, you'll see the enjoyments of life, such was now my theory, are sufficient to make it a pleasant thing when they are taken en passant, which means incidentally or by the way, without being made a principal object. So basically, Mill's idea, I think, is that if we directly make happiness our goal, we'll never find it, because happiness is a byproduct of something else. And what that thing is that it's a byproduct of is some kind of worthy goal or pursuit in life that is meaningful to us in some way. Like, for example, helping other people, in some way. So if that's our goal, then, and we pursue it, then Mill's argument is that by living this virtuous kind of life and helping others, we can find happiness and it will come to us, but only as a byproduct of doing something else. It's like if we directly try to find happiness, it's elusive, we'll never find it. But if we understand that it's just, happiness is just a byproduct of doing something positive, for example, this is just one possibility, but helping someone else, then we'll be fine. We'll realize happiness. But the second we stop to ask if we're happy, we've suddenly made happiness the object of our attention. And when happiness is the object of our attention, we can never find it, because it's only a byproduct. It's not really a thing in and of itself.
That's good. That's really good. I hadn't thought of it that way. And that's exactly what Mill believes, and McMahon as well. And even Carlyle in his grumpy little way, which we'll talk about shortly. But that's exactly it. The goal of happiness is elusive. People will always disappoint you. The more you try to make somebody else happy, the more likely they are to pull you back down. It's best not to try to just, go through and interact and then find the goodness in it. Okay. So that was the first part of the argument. And you want to put it in your own words. And since this is the first essay for some of us who have not met before, I will tell you this about me, and I'm pretty sure Mr. Short would concur, but I would rather hear your opinion than you're trying to sound like a college student. If you have a rich writing style and it's natural to you, then by all means write your voice. But I know that once a teacher puts the word essay on an assignment, some it's suddenly all woo, and it has to be upheld and venerated, and it's not. Writing is all about what your feelings are, what your expressions are. So it's got to be in your voice. So I don't need fancy. I need your voice. So you would explain that argument. Part 2 is to say to what extent you agree or disagree. What I like about the way this is worded is that you don't have to say, I agree or I disagree. What if you agree with part of it, but disagree with another part? It doesn't give you that room. This way it does. So let's talk about that theory, with happiness not being a focal point, that if we're going to be happy, it's only through our day-to-day interactions and the choices that we make. Do you guys agree with that, or is there parts that you don't agree with it? What do you say?
I mean, I agree with that.
Okay.
I agree.
Do you disagree with any part of it?
I feel like some part of you has to be thinking about your happiness at some point.
Okay. So there should be a goal of it, but not a high expectation of it?
Like, I usually go into the day with, pretty low standards, and, it's like, whatever.
And you strike me as that kind of person, Austin. And it's in a good way. It's a good way. It's that whatever happens, happens. And I can face any challenge, and I can face any person, and it is what it is.
Yeah, because I'll walk up, and if something bad happens, I'm like, I expected worse.
I'm sure that's a healthy way to look at it too.
certainly makes it interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And so you're never disappointed, are you?
No. Unless I don't give like 100% of what I'm doing to what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's like, crap.
You get disappointed in yourself then.
Yeah, if I'm not going 100%, then you should be.
Okay. Very good. See, that's the voice I want to hear. Justin, you were saying too that there were parts that you kind of didn't agree with. Or what? Can you give an example of how that might look?
I feel like on a daily basis, like yeah, you should like go through like with the empty mind and just go through your day how it goes. But at the end of the day, there should always be like something you're trying to attain from that one day.
Okay.
Whether that be like school goals, like emotional goals, sports goals, there has to be something that you're working for.
Okay. But those goals in and of themselves aren't where the happiness lays, right? Is it, or is that?
It's like partially this.
Partially. Okay.
Success feels it.
Success. Aha. Is success the same as happiness? They tied together? I think they are, yeah, but it is different if you're aiming for success. Now, if you don't achieve that success, what happens to you? Do you get disappointed? Or do you think, oh, I'll try again tomorrow?
Well, first you get disappointed, and then you just have to get over it, and the next day work harder.
Okay. So that's a really good point, is the fact that we do need to set some goals for ourselves. And in the achievement of those goals, we do find happiness. But if we don't achieve them, it's kind of like New Year's resolutions. Do you guys make them? No, I don't either. You know why? Probably the same reason.
No one ever achieves this.
I mean, you're lucky if you can make it to the 13th of January with that resolution, but I doubt it goes past that. Haley or Sinai, what do you think that there's any part of happiness that you can seek and find? Give them a minute.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, do you find that there is happiness within setting and reaching goals, or do you think it's better to just kind of do what Mill is saying, and that is to just live your life and then find that joy along the way?
Well, I think that if you have something set, like if you want to do good in school or something, like you could be happy with doing that, but like if you reach it, you could be disappointed, but just like if you don't reach it, you could be disappointed, but then just try again some other time after you get over what you didn't succeed.
Yeah. And I think
but
that
you also just be happy without doing that too. Like you don't have to be happy just to reach a goal.
Right. And so that should carry you when you don't reach it. It might be the people you're with, especially when they can give you encouragement. That's always a good thing when someone you love says, hey, you tried, you did real good, you did your best. You'll have another opportunity, and the next time you'll probably achieve it. So that kind of encouragement can give that contentment to you. That's another thing, the concept of happiness. Can we define it? Is there any way that it's... Because I think there's a lot more words that can sufficiently describe that feeling of happiness. Say that again? So what would be another word that you would think best describes the feeling we want to attain?
Sort of like a rush.
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one because it's definitely that thing that just kind of washes over you. It is the adrenaline rush, and it is a feeling that just washes over you. I like the word contentment. That what you? Yeah. Why do you like that word too?
Because it's just kind of like it stays with you.
Mm-hmm.
It stays with you. Like joy, for example, sounds like it just stays for a short time.
Mm-hmm.
Where euphoria is just like a strong feeling of happiness for a short time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, contentment sounds like it almost stays with you for a while.
I like that. I really like that definition. That's good. So, putting that in your response can also help. One of the things when you are writing is it's good to define the important concepts. And that's kind of why we did that activity where we had the 9 different words that are related to happiness, and you were to kind of organize them. Because it does, since it is so abstract, you have to kind of let your audience know where you're coming from. And that's part of the information the audience should know. There's that question. We'll be discussing that shortly. But what information should your audience know if they haven't read the article? And so at that point, it's also a good idea to talk about what happiness is to you. So when you're going through and defining what Mill says, you can say, "Here's what I see happiness as being." Okay, so part 3 is the ability to provide. You need to provide examples and reasons from your own experiences, observations, and readings. So here's what I've noticed about this article. If you look at all of by the way, does anybody need an extra copy of this? If you've got the article in front of you, go ahead and take that out. Can you pass that over to Justin, please? Thank you. Especially the quotes. So you've got the quotes from Carlyle, you've got the quotes from Mill, but they're all opinion quotes. And so the only way that they provide evidence is by who says them. So let's look first at Carlyle. What about Carlyle makes him a good source for McMahon's writing? What information do we know about Carlyle?
We know he's a friend of John,
Mm-hmm.
and that he's aren't they both philosophers?
Yes. Well, Carlyle, I think, is more, he's probably a philosopher, but I think he's more of a historian. Because look at the information he's offering this essay.
I was gonna say he has some interesting selections for words.
He does. Pitifulest whipster, which I'm able to say now. I couldn't say it earlier.
Yeah, thou shalt.
Yeah.
I was reading that. I was like, huh, there's a little something going on here.
Well, this is 1843. The English language, gosh, it has morphed so many times since it was 1099 that we had the what they called the big. I think of it as one of those old detective little circle things where you kind of shift, vowel shift, word shift, people conquer people.
How do we read Alexis quote?
Yeah, because it was written in 1843. And then you've got to do math, which, English, this is English, why are we doing math? So what is the information that Carlyle's giving us?
I get that. It is a lot better than we used to, but there's no more satisfaction.
The second part, definitely. But the first part has to do with the concept of happiness. Have we always sought happiness as mankind? According to Carlyle. Mm-mm.
I started just recently.
To him, writing in 1843, he says it happened when? 17th century. Now, for centuries, remember when they give you a century, you have to back up one. and give the year. So that would be the 1600s. What significant event happened in the 1600s?
Wasn't that when the Mayflower came?
One of them. That's not the most significant, but it's related to that significant event. It's a period of time known as the what?
What was the Protestant Reformation?
The,
That was a long. That was before that.
the Reformation, the Church's Reformation. Mr. Short, did the Church's Reformation happen during this period? Do you think it was because you know the answer of what I'm trying to think of. Was the Reformation part of the 1600 era?
Let's talk about like religion.
It was 16th century,
Okay.
and I'm not sure exactly what the dates were, but I think probably like mid 1500s at some point. That's my best.
And I'm wondering if then for the 1600s, the 17th century, if that period of time was a result of that Reformation. Do you think so?
Well, I mean, if you look at, like, for example, gosh, all of the stuff that was going on in Europe with, the anti-Catholic sentiment in, like, Shakespeare's time, for example. Like, Shakespeare's dad, was a glover, and he made leather goods, and he made a lot of money, and he was very involved in politics, but because he was Catholic, he was basically driven out of his position as a politician locally,
Right.
and he lost his position as a glover. I think the Reformation had a huge impact on individual people, especially during Shakespeare's time, because Shakespeare was born in 1564 and died in 1616. And so I think we're still experiencing the effects of the Reformation.
And the period of time I'm thinking about is the sudden influx of scientific pursuit.
I like science. All right.
Do you know what that period of time is called? And it not just science, but in the arts.
Industrial Revolution? No, that was way later. That's 200 years ago. What are you talking about? Crap.
You have this sudden interest in art, science, even humanities. The humanities especially.
I know what you're talking about, but I don't know the name.
And it means to change over, to renew itself.
Yes,
Thank you! Very good. The Renaissance.
I was thinking about it.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm pretty sure.
But that's around this period of time. And one of the significant things that happens in this time is this whole idea of man pursuing his own goals, and even at some point to be separated as an individual, so that maybe they have more control over their own lives than God and the stars and all of that was believed before them.
That's when everyone started becoming their own person, basically.
Yes.
That's when they were expressing themselves with art and other things, just doing what they wanted to do.
And so that's where happiness probably came from. That, as Carlyle has theorized, this is what made happiness in the form of pleasure or good feeling not only morally acceptable, but commendable in and of itself. You were a self-made man. This was not something that anything else had control over you. You were the one who did it yourself. So at the time that he's writing this, along with Mill, it's only been about 100 years. And so he's coming back and he's saying, look, this is not something that can be achieved or obtained. I suppose that if you were rich and you had what you wanted, you might be happy. But if we look at even rich people today, Do you think that rich people are happy?
It's not spending time doing it. Spending all the money that they have to it's all value.
Notice you said self-sacrifice. So now it doesn't become the possessions, but it becomes achievement, doesn't it? Um, it's kind of interesting to think about that whole concept. Like, the we're supposed to be independent. We're supposed to be happy. In fact, the writers of the Declaration of Independence say we have the right. Well, who gave us the right?
Who?
They did, yeah. The ones who made it up. They did. It is not guaranteed. I can't think of any religion where happiness, and specifically on earth, is a guaranteed thing. Can you think of any source where it says everybody can be happy?
The closest you can get really is them wanting to achieve happiness and having like
Okay.
Buddhism.
In Buddhism,
Yeah.
the ability to achieve it, and again, it comes back to
That's the closest thing you can really get.
that's the yeah, and that again is the journey. It's all related to the journey. Good. Okay. One other thing I want to point out about this is the part about the experiences or observations. One of the best tools that I think teachers take away from students is the art of story. I believe that whatever evidence you pull from a source can only be as good as your own application of a story to go with it. So that if I'm saying that I agree with, let's see, let's say that I'm going to use Carlyle. Every pitifulest whipster that walks about in his skin has a head full of, or filled with the notion that he is or shall be by all human and divine laws ought to be happy. I remember a New Year's Eve party. I was I was a junior. I think this would be my junior year of high school. Went to a with my church group. Somebody had a New Year's Eve party, so there was no drinking, no naughty stuff. People were dancing, people were playing games, people were talking. But I found myself sitting off to the side, completely bored and completely disinterested. And I realized I hate New Year's Eve because I'm tired by 9 o'clock at night. I'm not used to staying up all night. And quite frankly, I don't see the big deal. The biggest deal for me for New Year's is I get to change the calendar. That's a big deal for me because I've spent some time picking out which calendar I want for the year. But really, what does New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, what does it really signify? Yeah.
It's just starting the year over again.
So what's the difference between New Year's Day and your birthday?
Your birthday is signifying your birth.
Which is when I started living.
Yeah.
That doesn't really have an effect or an impact on the year that it's going to be.
Yeah, because it's still not going to be a whole entire year until you actually next year older.
Right. So to me, it's no big deal. So I can use part of that to say that why should I have a happy New Year? Any day is going to have good things and bad things happen. 2019 has had its ups and downs. Here we are, more than halfway through. It's been okay. Has it been happy? So it's applying yourself to what the quote is. Do any of you guys have some kind of little anecdote or observation that you were reminded of when you read pieces of this?
I'm tired.
Jump in, Sunai or Haley, either one. Can you even if it's not something that happened to you personally. It could be something that maybe happened in a movie that you saw or a book that you read, something like that. Looking at it doesn't even have. I probably shouldn't have picked Carlyle. Look back at Mill. If you look back at Mill's quote, those only are happy who have their minds fixed on some object rather than their own happiness. When you hear that, do you have an image that comes to your mind?
I do. Like the movie Shazam.
Uh
I
huh.
don't know if anyone's watched that. It's about Billy Batson. He's adopted. His mom lost him when he was little, and he spent like most of his life looking for his mom. And he was always just depressed. He was always just mad at it. Who went, he run away. Didn't matter. And then of course he became Shazam, full of powers and stuff. And then he got preoccupied, and then he was Superman.
Because he stopped.
Karen,
Yeah.
He was focused somewhere else.
Perfect. I know you're like, really? Shazam? I can use Shazam in this essay? And yes, you can. That's fine. I think it's a lot better for me. We want to see your thinking processes in writing. We don't want to hear the fanciest words you got. That's why you will never see a vocabulary test from me, ever.
Are we gonna have like an actual outline for the essay?
Yeah, you'll have. There is one in this presentation, so we will be getting to that. But you don't have to follow it. Okay.
I'm so bad at like outlines. I'm like really good at like doing essay, but I'm not good at outlines, dude.
Well, I would, yeah. Which I want. I know that you've probably all been trained up in the 5-paragraph essay, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and you'll see that the outline is a 5-paragraph essay. You do not, under any circumstances, have to follow it. I want you to go through a detox, right? You know, through this year, and it might continue into your junior year. You're going to need to separate yourself from that 5-paragraph essay. It was good for you in junior high. It gave you structure. It gave you some visible pieces to put with the right terms. But now they can go in any order. The only thing that I think is important is that somewhere in the first part, you do have to have that thesis there. So if you wanted to open with your Shazam story, you would give, it might take you, what, 2 paragraphs to tell us what you just said? Probably. Don't make it any more than that. And then at the end, so this is why I agree with John Stuart Mill when he says. So that's how they can work. They can work anywhere in the story, and you'll have the outline. But eventually, I'm hoping that you'll feel more comfortable now organizing this outside of that outline. But that's what the goal really is for this year, because when you get into your junior year, that's where there's a big gap between English 9 standards and English 10 standards. And this is the year that we really need to make sure you stretch so that you can bridge that gap. Okay, so what specific question will your essay answer? And about 2/3 of people, they didn't get this one right. So that's why they got an incomplete on it. But what is the question you're actually being asked? You can go back to that, I think it's the 3rd slide, and whatever has been highlighted in yellow. What are you being asked, Tara? I know you got it right.
Did I get it right?
You got it right. I'm pretty, yeah, because I graded yours. I graded it earlier this morning, I believe, or last night.
I did like 3 in one night. I don't know what you're
Okay, what is the specific prompt asking you? What are you supposed to answer?
You're supposed to answer like, do you agree with them?
Do you agree or disagree with Mill?
Oh,
That's it.
I haven't even done it, so.
That's why I told everybody to get to 1.3.1, because this is 1.3.1.
Yeah, because it's the thing.
There you go. So
for a second, I thought it was really wrong.
No. I would not call on you if I knew you got it wrong. That would be stupid. Well, you didn't have to tell everybody, but It's okay. And this is another little mini lesson. You've got to be careful of what the prompt asks you to do, especially when you get into that SBAC next year. They'll give you, you know how big that paragraph is that you have to read before you actually get to the prompt? They'll do that and more. So you've got to be really careful of what the task is asking you to do. So your tentative answer is, I do agree with Stuart Mill when he says blah. I agree with him to a point. However,
Can I actually?
yes, yes. Everybody, I would expect that everybody in our classes, between Mr. Short and myself, your theses, I don't know what the plural of thesis is, theses, I think it's theses, will all be generally the same, because this is technically a yes or no answer.
Yeah, it's hard to get.
This is Mrs. Campbell.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I have a student who just came in who needs some kind of like intervention right now, so I'm going to be out of commission for a minute.
All right. Thank you for letting me know.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, the second question was, which views on creating happiness most clearly mirror your own? Whose views do we have?
We have John and Carlisle,
And
the guy who actually wrote this.
Bruce McMahon, right. So we've got the three of them. Are they all the same, or are they slightly different? Okay. So which one stands out to you the most? Let's summarize one's view. Who do you want to start with?
For me, it was. No.
Okay.
How to choose like air products and other things. And like, make you happy.
Right. And look at who Mills is. Look at his characteristics. What do you know about him? By the way, you guys are welcome to have this water if you want.
You recommend that?
Yes. He suffered with depression, and he came up with this conclusion after he went through that experience. So to me, that is telling me that he has had hands-on experience. To me, that makes him the most, you're going to be learning a term called ethos. Ethos means your authority to speak on a subject. How do you know what you know? And to me, he has the greatest ethos because he had a personal experience with it. Plus, I have myself too, and so I've been able to identify with that. And so yes, we've got Mill, who was a philosopher, yes, but I think the more important part is that he did go through a bout of depression. And so his view about happiness is what? But what is happiness according to Mill?
Just as you said, a byproduct.
Right. And so our own happiness has to just be encountered. We can't go looking for it. We go through, we do our lives the way we do our lives, and then we hope along the way we have joy, we have happiness.
I make sure we resubmit it.
Right. Yeah. That actually, I tell you what. In fact, I forgot to mention this in the first seminar, but because you're here, if you participate in this, you would want to rewrite it for yourself, but you don't have to resubmit the whole document rewritten if you don't want to. You can just write Writing Lab, submit that, and I'll give you full credit on this assignment because you're here. No, you didn't get there yet. But if you already have a grade and you resubmit Writing Lab, I'll give you the full credit.
I resubmitted yesterday.
Okay.
You
Have I graded it yet?
not again.
Okay, then you're fine. Yeah. Well, go ahead and resubmit it, Writing Lab, and then that'll remind me. I probably would remember when I get to yours, but that's not a guarantee. Okay. So that was Mill. Now, Carlisle, let's get to Mr. Grouchy here. What's his view on happiness?
Bah humbug.
Right. Bah humbug. And you're going to have to be a little bit more explanatory if you use that one. You can't get it. You can't reach it. You cannot set it as a goal and go find it. Simple as that. He doesn't really say what should you do instead. He leaves that up to his buddy Mill, John Mill. Huh?
You figure it out.
Yeah, that's right.
Do whatever.
That's why I love how McMahon says he's notoriously cranky. Now, here's what when I was talking about ethos before. What is the ethos of Carlisle? I mean, do you trust somebody who talks like that to tell you about happiness?
Yes.
You would?
I mean, you would obviously know that he's missing something.
That's true. Why do you think that? What clue are you getting for that? That he knows he's missing something. So obviously he doesn't know what it is. Yeah. I don't know if he's aware of that, though. Do you think he'd be aware of that?
I don't know. My mind just made the connection and just said it. That was just intuitive. I don't know.
It's
Are
the
you-
vibes, man.
Yes, the vibe just went. I was like, what?
Are you secretly a Carlisle here? I don't think you're this sarcastic and cranky. I haven't heard that or seen that yet. So.
Yes.
Yet. Okay, so his, depending on who you are, that may be it. Look, happiness is the concept that really isn't around. That's just something we made up. So deal with life.
Sort of like measurements. You just kind of made those up.
Exactly.
Like, explain. How do you how would you even conceive what a gram is if nothing exists? If there was no way to measure anything, then how do
I'm
you
not
measure
worried
something
about
that's measured?
that. I'm worried about my HDL and is it HDL and LDL? The cholesterol levels?
Is it HDL bad?
Apparently they're all bad,
Oh,
and they keep changing the numbers. So it's like every time I go to the doctor, my number keeps getting lower, but he keeps saying still high, still high. Well, quit lowering the stupid threshold. So, yeah, I think that's it. Because and measurements come in that in the Renaissance, the keeping of time. We're no longer measuring in hours; we're measuring in minutes and seconds. So it's yeah.
just confusing.
Okay, now McMahon. So those are those two. What's McMahon's? Where do you place McMahon on that? Because I would think that Mill is on one side, Carlisle is on the other. Where in that line would you put McMahon?
He's just like a little bit of a lighter gray.
Mm-hmm. What has he said that kind of sums up what he believes happiness is? Very good. Now, do you know what by the by means?
My interpretation by the by, like as you're going by and doing stuff. with it?
Exactly.
There you go.
That's it.
Cool.
As you encounter it, you're just going along, doing what you do. If you're lucky, happiness will, hey, hi, will just be there. Good. Okay, so you pick which. Well, you're not technically asked this. However, you could say, while Mill is very descriptive on what he believes happiness is, I think I identify more with Carlisle when he says that. You can make that part of your thesis too if you wish. Okay, now the support that you have found for your thesis, we wanted the minimum of 4 quotes. And what I had put in there were several people who did not attribute it. And the thing is, it's going to be super important when you're writing to make sure you're quoting the right person. McMahon is quoting Carlyle. McMahon is quoting Mill. However, and now this is kind of a little chink in the chain there, I've given you more of Mill through the prompt. So if there's something in that prompt that you would rather use, you only need to attribute that to Mill in the essay. But if you're going to use, let's say, the quote from paragraph 10, ask yourself whether you are happy and you cease to be so. You would say Carlyle quotes John Stuart Mill saying, and then you would quote it. So one of the activities, and I call it the between activity because it kind of gives you a little bit of time to wait for the peer review to come in, is practicing. I think somebody left. Let me double check something here quick. Nope, Sinai and Haley are both here still. So cool. You'll want to make sure that whatever quote you pick, you put whose name is on it. And so it's good to find that out now. I think most of the quotes are kind of the same that I was seeing. But again, you want a little bit of a story that kind of goes with each quote. So maybe something you might want to do before you get going on the writing is to look at those 4 quotes and see, do I have a story that reminds me of what this quote is saying?
So each quote, like the paragraph in itself.
No, you can actually use 2 quotes in one. In fact, that should be the ratio anyway. Whenever you're writing a body paragraph, there should be at least 2 quotes, and each quote has what I call analysis.
Yeah, we had that in high school last year. Talked to each other like 2
Commentary. That is the ratio. The difference is it doesn't have to be in that order. Concrete, detail, commentary, commentary. In fact, Jane Schaefer herself, who came up with that, taught the art of weaving, what she called weaving. And I discovered that most teachers never got that far. Yeah. You did the 4 color pens and you wrote your commentaries in red and green and yeah. And so the weaving was that, you're right, it's supposed to look really colorful because you're putting together the commentaries and the concrete details.
And very intricate way.
Yes, yeah. Most of the teachers I saw never did that. Plus, I'm not really good at knitting and crocheting, and so to me, I couldn't get the right analogy. Because I want my voice to come out, so I don't want to go to a formula. Okay, now how do these support your thesis? This is where we have to talk about analysis. You have to figure out, how does this detail line up with what I said? And so if you are to use those only are happy who have minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness, how does that support your thesis that happiness is not a product you can go and find? It's a byproduct of something else. How do they fit together? How would you explain it? Okay, so if I'm using the quote, those are only happy who have their minds fixed on some other object than their own happiness, how does that support my claim that happiness is a byproduct of what life brings you?
You have to actually find evidence to explain stuff.
And the evidence is going to come from where?
Yes. Oh.
This is where those little narratives can come in. If you're giving an example, can you think of a time when your mind, as long as you fixed it on something else, you suddenly found yourself happy?
Yeah, because if you write like something bad, and then other people care about it momentarily.
What is one incident in your life where you knew that happened?
Mom was really upset. I went to sleep and woke up and I was super happy. Like I like that day I was just like I did not laugh at anything. I couldn't laugh at anything. It was like a funny joke. I like after work, I was like, oh man, she was really funny. It was hilarious. I just went, okay. I went to sleep and woke up and was like, I feel great. And I realized like when you like get away for a little bit and you can like recalculate yourself and just like reset, it makes it so easy.
Okay, good. Justin, what was yours?
After sports work,
Okay.
if you lose, or you kind of down or anything, then you should always have to go to school and have to get it.
And was there a specific game you remember when this happened?
Yeah.
Okay. And if you don't have a specific one in mind, make it up. Okay. You want that specific event. You want to take your reader into it, because suddenly when they're there, yeah, I get it. Can you think of one, Tara, that you might want to use? Or do you just not want to share it?
I don't know, just like, I don't really have one.
Okay. Would you be using that quote? That one that I gave you? Who have their minds fixed on some other thing than their own happiness? Or could you make up a scenario?
I guess if you just are having a bad day and you go and go by yourself, do something to your room and just do something that distracts you, like playing video games or something like that.
Right.
Usually what I do.
Make it specific. Like, tell us the name of the game you're going to play, or tell us, it just seemed like I could not get myself back up. So what I did was I went into my room and I turned on my set and I got out. I don't know what game would make you feel better.
Minecraft.
Okay, I just brought up Minecraft, and wouldn't you know, I got it in like 7 moves or whatever. You can make it up. So by doing that, I think that's the best way that it supports your thesis. Okay, I haven't played Minecraft and I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, you played Minecraft at one point?
I have. When it was, because you guys will never know what it was like to have the old Windows computers. Because Minecraft, at that point, was the only game other than Solitaire that you could play
Really?
on a computer.
The oldest one I ever had was Windows 7. And like, so.
This was 95.
Oh.
So yes, I did play it. I realized I'm very bad at it. Horrible at it. I would prefer Mastermind. I figure Mastermind is the same concept on the game, only I like it better because that's the one where you have to figure out, the right order of the colored pegs. And so to me, I could make my mind do that better than for Minecraft. It's like chess. You have to be able to see things in a certain way, and I can't do that. I'm not good at that.
This is fun though.
Yeah, it's not my cup of tea.
I spent like 2 or 3 hours like at a hotel, and they told me how to go outside because like they had this big chessboard with like big pieces. They said you're out here too long. It was like 11 or 12 o'clock, and like go back in. I was like, oh.
And by the time you're deeply immersed in that game, try going to sleep.
I'd like to see you try and play Dark Souls if Minecraft is hard for you.
Oh.
What's Dark Souls?
Dark Souls?
Dark Souls.
I couldn't get past the first one for like the first boss for like a month almost.
It is
like
by far like easily like one of the most aggravating games you get. It's like chess, but each piece is on steroids.
Why would you want to do that to me?
If you got through it, you would be like.
I couldn't even imagine getting through the whole game. I gave up on the game. I can't do it.
I can't even, if my husband wants to rearrange the furniture in our living room, and he'll tell me, I'd like to move the couch over by the window. That way we can move the mule chest over to there, and then we can actually set the TV over here, and what do you think? And I'll say, I'm still trying to move the couch by the window, because I can't see it in my mind. So, okay, we digress. I apologize. Assuming your readers know nothing about the article, and you have to do that, because remember that this is, first of all, your reader is not necessarily me. Yes, I am one of them, but not as your teacher. I am somebody who is interested in your opinion on happiness.
It's like us reading this, basically.
Right. You are looking at peers, but what it comes down to is who would you want to read what you write about happiness? Who would you really like to kind of explain all of this to?
And general audiences.
Right? Who do you see as that general audience? What about that general audience? Okay. Especially people who maybe they do have depression. Maybe they do have a certain cynicism towards life. And you're trying to show them, hey, look, yeah, happiness is just an illusion. That would make a good song. And so that's your reader. So they know nothing about Carlyle, Mill, or McMahon. So what is some important background information from the article that you think they need to know before they read it? Keep this in mind. This is not a conversation. Well, it is. It's just one-way conversation. You do not have the luxury of talking with that person. You can't ask questions. You can't say, well, you just don't know what you're talking about. You have to anticipate what somebody reading this who may not quite agree with you, what they would have to say. So they need to know a little background information. What should you tell them about this article? Which ones are we looking at specifically? Which details?
You need to find like the important parts, like the quotes.
Okay,
that
let's
have, like more meaningful sentences. Like, if you seek happiness, was it you cease to be it, or is it?
Okay, now, so that comes from Mill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we said earlier, what's the important thing about Mill that the audience should know?
That he was depressed.
That he went through a bout of depression.
So you had mentioned that too.
Yes. And in fact, he's also, what is his claim to fame? What would be his occupation, say? Philosopher. Now, all you need to do is when you introduce that quote, say, philosopher John Stuart Mill, comma, who had gone through a bout of depression, comma. Introduce the quote. That's all you need. Let's look at some other important things that we need to know. Is there anything important we need to know about Carlyle?
He's friends with Mr. Mill, and he's known to not have the greatest qualities in him.
Okay. Actually, I think the quote itself would say he doesn't have the greatest outlook. Is being a friend of Mill's important to our understanding of the article? But Carlyle does give us some knowledge we need to know that our audience doesn't. What is that he provides for this article? What important information does he provide for this article? Three and four. Well, actually, you could probably put in 5 and 6 there too, but
Well, in 4, he kind of talks about how the thought of happiness being a lot of people's main goal came from like virginity.
that's it. The audience needs to know that part, because to me, that was the part that when I read this article for the first time, that shocked me. Happiness is not a concept that has been around, at least in his point of view, for very long, because it was only 100 years. And even now, it's becoming, the paragraph 7 kind of gives support for that, where the sociologists point out that the percentage of those describing themselves as happy or very happy has virtually unchanged since the 1950s. And here's the weird part. There's a lot more people than there were in the 1950s. Yet the percentages stayed the same. So are we indeed happy? There's no evidence for that. So if you're going with defining the concept of happiness, it'd be really good to let the audience know what Carlyle's theory about happiness was. Okay. Was there anything in paragraphs 8 through 11, because 12 we know is going to be the conclusion, is there anything back there that's added information that people should know as you're writing out your response to this?
Can you repeat that?
Is there anything important on 8 through 11? Any background information that's important there that they need to know?
Well, it talks about the relation between wealth and the creation of good feelings.
Good.
8.
Good. Yes. And that would be economists. These are economists that are arguing that it's happiness we need to focus on, not richness. Very good. Okay. Usually as you're getting towards the end of the article, by that point, most of the evidence has been presented. So now if you think that you just have to put your mind in the head of the person who's reading this saying, so-and-so did not read the article, do they need to know something? Okay. So number 6, assume that some readers will disagree with your viewpoint. What would they say? How would you address those concerns? Let me ask you this. Can you think of a person, famous or otherwise, infamous, who would disagree with the basic concept behind this article?
I can't think of a person who would straight off say no, which just makes it hard. So it makes the answer the question a little bit more difficult.
I can actually think of a few. Who might look at this article and say, "Ah, that's crap." Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to name one person. I just to name a person, and you let me know if that would be one of the people who do. Donald Trump. Would he agree with this?
I don't think he really say for sure because he really knows in person.
Yeah, no one really knows him as much. So you could say yes, but
have there been things that he said that seem to contradict the concept that happiness is a byproduct?
I don't keep up this much with politics,
Okay.
so I can't say.
Let's see. Let's go with somebody else. Name someone else who might have a different outlook on life. If I say something, I'm going to date myself, and I'm afraid to. Yeah, that happiness is something you can go and find. Happiness is something that sure, all you have to do is work hard and do your best, and you'll be happy for all your life. Do you know anybody like that? Heath Ledger. Yes.
He was famous, successful, but
Exactly, that'd be a perfect example.
he made himself like mentally insane.
The role probably did that to him. He got himself so into that role.
Yeah, he went like out on the streets. Yeah, he like isolated himself. I think
Right.
Like that for like months.
And I think if you looked at a lot of these famous people, these celebrities who kill themselves through. I mean, basically, it was a suicide, but it was through a drug overdose. Because are they truly trying to commit suicide, or are they just simply so down and into themselves that they take the drugs in order to escape? And so you've got a lot to choose from there. What would they say about this?
But, you can't always have happiness just by being living through life.
And that's agreeing with that. But are there people who would say, look, I have the money, I have the power, I have I'm happy because I have achieved all of this in my life.
I was about to say Elton John, but no, that wouldn't really apply as much as him because if you look at his childhood and how he goes through, and towards the end of it, he found happiness just by meeting some guy.
Right. Not about the money and the fame and the this.
So people that have been unhappy until they got the money and all that.
Yeah, he's still unhappy and then just
I would think that the people who got money and who are very shallow, there's no depth to their personality where every example I'm coming up with dates me. There was a movie called Ordinary People. In fact, that was the bluest eye of my day because it was about this rich, white, affluent family whose the oldest son killed himself. There's no reason given in the movie why he did it. But there was the mom, the dad, and then the two sons, the older and younger. It was the older one who committed suicide. The mother in that movie, played by Mary Tyler Moore, is so shallow and so everything has to be right. Everything has to be perfect. And because her son died, that has really upset her organized life. And you never get the feeling that she really misses the kid. She just misses, the picture of the family. And she's so rotten to the younger son. It's eventually the younger son tries to kill himself. And so there are people out there who would say, look, it's all about keeping up appearances. If you have the right stuff around you, you can be happy. That would be the counter argument. What would you say to those people? I think there's one that you would come up with real quickly because we talked about it. What's your definition of happiness? Wouldn't that be a good one? Because what is happiness? I think the very fact that it cannot be defined, at least it's so general. It's just this big generic term that we have to redefine it. What does it mean to us? Like contentment. So maybe it's that, contentment has that permanence that you said, rather than happy and joyful, which is temporary. That would be a good thing to say back to them. Anybody who would argue with this probably disagrees with what the concept of happiness is. So now, the thing is, you're not going to exactly say that in the essay. You probably would set it up as, there are quite a number of people who've achieved all their goals in life. However, I wonder if they're really happy. Do they? Because to me, I know a lot of people who, it doesn't matter how much money they get, there's always a better car, there's always a better house, there's always a better set of clothes. They're never, ever really satisfied with what they have. I think maybe it's the disagreement comes with how you define your happiness. Okay. Working thesis. We did examine this earlier. draft a possible thesis for your essay. You can change it at any point. And we did talk about there being, I agree with John Stuart Mill when he says, and you don't even have to say the whole thing. You could, you have to include John Stuart Mill. It doesn't have to be in the form of a quote. You can paraphrase what he said.
I feel like I give John Stuart Mill the views
of how he describes happiness. Yeah, that would be fine. That would be fine. Anybody else want to test drive their thesis? Okay. And Haley and Sunai, I want to check in with you guys too. Is there? Would you like to? Do you have a suggestion on a thesis or something you want to test out?
I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
I would say I would agree with him because he thinks happiness as a goal and not only a goal, but something you can reach and still be happy in different ways.
I like that. I like that a lot, the concept of it being a goal. Very nice. Just make sure you put John Stuart Mill. In fact, I would even go ahead, if you do the John Stuart Mill, philosopher who battled depression, comma, then you don't have to summarize that part.
Okay.
Kara, did you want to?
Like, is there an actual thesis in that?
Yeah, if you want.
Or like.
Sometimes talking it out gets it onto the page too. So however you want to present it, whatever works best for you.
I've already written it, so.
Go ahead, read it.
Okay. The author, Darren
McMahon.
It's okay. Uses quotes from different philosophers to prove that happiness comes externally, and explaining why he agrees with the nature of happiness.
We need to, yeah, because if the direct question was, do you agree with Mill? And I think from what I'm hearing is that you agree with McMahon, who agrees with Mill, or is there an element to McMahon that's a little different that you prefer over Mill's idea? Okay, so say the first part of that again.
It was just any article on Pursuit of Happiness is discussed on how you can achieve true happiness.
I think that's going to help you in the first body paragraph with the explanation, because you have to describe what basically the theme is about, and that's where it comes from. So if you save that for the topic sentence for the first body paragraph, then the other suggestion would be replace McMahon with Mill, and can it work the same way if you just say philosopher John Stuart Mill? You could use it that way too. Okay. And then bring in McMahon in that first body paragraph, because that's where this quote comes from, and you're welcome to do that. Okay. Anybody else?
Can I read my favorite?
Sure.
I agree with John Stuart Mill that he is a view of it, and also not much happiness very true.
Very good. That alone could be your introduction. We're getting. I don't think we really need to go through this because we've talked about already. You know, are you using a quote? Are you using an anecdote? Remember that with this kind of essay, you're going to need a balance of the two, because the quotes by themselves only work if you explain who Mill was, who Carlyle was, or McMahon. We did talk about the counterargument. Okay, so here is the outline that you were looking for. The introduction should have a hook and a claim. It is okay to just have the claim. But what is the benefit of the hook? Do you know what I mean when I say hook?
It's your hook reason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested.
And so that's the benefit to it. And that's where the little story can come from. If you're asked if you agree with John Stuart Mill and you start talking about Shazam, I'm going to be like, what? I'm going to be curious. I'm going to want to read further. That's the benefit of it. Because once you've taken the reader on that kind of little roller coaster ride, exactly, it kind of like goes right to the, what's the pleasure center back there, the hippocampus or something like that. I don't know. I'm not a biology teacher. So. It's that pleasure center. There's something about, especially if you can use sensory imagery in it. So if you're very descriptive and you can see, remember what the sensory imagery is. It's appealing to the senses. So sight, touch, taste, smell, hearing, sound. You just need a couple of them. It's again that ability to take the reader on kind of a little roller coaster. You get them kind of moving, and then you come into the claim. You're like, hey, that was fun. And now you want to read more. Okay, so the first body paragraph would be devoted to explaining the concept as Mill quotes it. Again, you don't have to use the whole thing. You can use the piece of it. If it's just the piece out of McMahon, fine.
Multiple Mills quotes.
Right. If you look back at that third slide, I think it is second or third slide, that's the whole thing. And the part that there's only 2 in the actual article. And I believe both of those come from that segment. So if you just use those, that's fine. But if there's something you like better coming out of the longer quote, then use that too. Just make sure to attribute it to him. Anyway, that's your first body paragraph. And so you're going to divide that concept up a couple different ways. So if you agree that happiness is a byproduct, what would be a logical way of kind of separating this into 2 parts? Right. What does create happiness? And so its antithesis there would be what doesn't. Why can't we go find happiness? What's the problem with that? So what do we do instead? Then that becomes the second part. And again, you're providing examples. And so the examples can be quotes. They can be the personal observations or anything you've read. Anything you've read. So if it was a book, if you saw a movie, whatever it is, you can use those as examples too. Now, paragraph 3 is addressing that counter argument. So, it's for the people reading this saying, these people don't know what they're talking about. And it's your ability to say, you have to define your level of happiness because it's subjective. It's intangible. We can't measure happiness. There's no way to measure it. And so that would be like your third paragraph. Then restating the claim. Now, Justin, plug your ears. You are not held to this rubric. If you write something outside of this rubric, if you organize it differently, you are not going to be marked down at all. What I'm looking for in this is your ability to summarize the idea and add your own flair to it. And then this is more informational. This is not technically argumentative, but the fact that you do address the counter argument kind of makes it a little argumentative, but really it is your expository idea of happiness and how to achieve it. Okay, here I've also given you a sample body paragraph. Notice how long it is. And in fact, in future essays, the 4 paragraph is just as acceptable if the body paragraphs are this big. The only reason there's the added one is because you have an added task. You have to explain the theory. So happiness is not found in material things. Topic sentence. McMahon explains Carlyle's theory that around the 17th century, the general consensus was that God made man to essentially be happy rather than suffer a life on earth as a way to heaven. And notice how I've referenced it because it's just the article. We only need to put in the paragraph number.
You wrote this?
So you can't have it. If you plagiarize me, I'll sue you. This idea is also reflected in our own Declaration of Independence that states we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, including the pursuit of happiness. However, if one were to look in any book of religious significance, this phrase is nowhere to be found. Yes, it would be wonderful if everyone could be happy all the time, but that is an impossibility considering how many people are in the world and how unequal they really are. Many people live in poverty, are poorly educated, suffer from physical and mental illness, or have experienced tragic events. For these people, happiness is a relative term. In order to experience this emotion, one has to choose to accept the circumstances he or she is born with and make the most of the situation. For example, a family living in poverty can still walk together to a local park where the children can play and meet others, enjoy a picnic of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and enjoy the scenery, or they can sit at home in misery and mourn what they don't have. This is what Mill means. He says the enjoyments of life are sufficient to make it a pleasant thing without being made a principal object. So those of you who were trained up in the Jane Schaefer method, notice that that's not in that order. That's kind of mixed up because I've got the concrete detail at the end. That's my concluding sentence. So you don't have to follow that order as long as you understand that the paragraph as a whole needs to flow. It also is good if you can make sure that it helps to flow into the next paragraph. This takes practice. So that's why with the formula, it's a good thing. But as you grow in your writing, now you're gonna experiment a little bit. And remember that it's your voice. People do not talk in Jane Schaefer paragraphs. They just don't. And so we want to, the plan is to present your idea, to present evidence to support it, to tie it back to that idea, and then it kind of just wrap it up in a nice little package. Okay. Now, I am asking you guys to practice the MLA formatting because by the time you get into college, you have to. The good news is when you see that pink button, that will link you to the class resources. And in that, it does explain about the MLA, but it also has the link to the Google pre-formatted MLA document. It is a template. The thing about that one is it also includes the works cited. If you are only using this article, you don't have to have one. So just cut that part off the bottom. If you do want to use some outside resources, then I would ask you to do the works cited, but you don't have to. Okay? Now, as I said before, the peer reviews are important because they have you focus in on something. In this case, I'm going to ask somebody else to look at your paper and look for the elements that we've just talked about in this writing lab. And it's just a matter of copying and pasting the questions into a Google Doc. And I'll show you something in just a second here. The essay is due tomorrow by 11:59 p.m. That means the minute before midnight. You got them tonight, all tomorrow to do to write it out. If it is, now here's the other thing too. I set Canvas to give out the peer reviews at 5 a.m. the next morning. So what does that mean? You still have 5 hours, but I would prefer you sleep. But if you can't, well, so there's a little bit of wiggle time there. Then what you do is you go back to 1.4.1 under your submission information. And that is also linked. So if we go back to, once you have, when you wake up the next morning, after you've written your essay, you're going to first go back to that first draft assignment. And you know how when you turn something in, you have that square there that says success and the time that you submitted it? Underneath or at the bottom part of that box, there's going to be somebody else's name, and that name links you to their paper. Get that paper open, and then move to the next assignment. That's where the peer review is.
That's that won't be due on Saturday, right?
No, the whole thing is due on Tuesday. Well, I mean, at this point, the only two due dates that you need to meet are the first draft and then when the peer review comes in. So the peer review needs to be in so that the person has it on the weekend to take a look at. But technically, there's no work that is required through the 3-day weekend. So we can say that the due date is on the following Tuesday, but really what you want to make sure is that the person has your feedback so that they can spend Tuesday with that feedback and revising your essay as needed. Yeah, you get the whole weekend. I always make sure that you have it. I do not require that you work on the weekend. I'm just saying that if you need it, you have it. Okay, so you go to the next page and you have some questions. Oh, I'm sorry. This paragraph, this 1.4.2 is what I call the between. The between assignment is to help kind of pass the time while you're waiting for your peer review to come through. And so this is just making sure you can identify who said what. And so that's kind of like an in-between assignment. Then the next assignment, the 1.4.3, is where you have the actual peer revision. If you want to skip over the 1.4.2 so that you can do the peer revision first, you can simply write, "will return to later." And then go ahead and do your peer review, grab your peer review, and go back to 1.4.2. It kind of helps that time that you're in the waiting period. I do have a little link here on this that shows you how you find that. What I just went over. What you will do is when you get here, you want to open a new Google Doc in your Drive, in your English folder, obviously, and oops. What I would recommend that you do is you name this, the actual number is 1.4.3 for, let's say that Austin got Tara's paper. So he would write 1.4.3 Tara Talbot, because you're going to have her full name in the link. So that would be the title of it. That helps me tremendously. I'm sorry.
There's no A in my last name.
I know. Okay. Copy and paste the questions, answer them. They're basically just focus questions. How did the student do that? When you to resubmit so that both Tara gets it and I get it, you're going to hit the share button. You're going to get the shareable link. That's the easiest one to do. Get the shareable link. Come back to the essay is going to be in a similar format. It's not quite the same, and Tara, help me out here because I rarely get to see it from your point of view. But when you get a peer review, it is more or less laid out like this, correct? I mean, your essay's here. You're going to have an essay here. You don't see the assignment score, but you have view the rubric, right?
Sometimes it shows up, sometimes it doesn't. Like,
okay.
If we get this little screen where we get the link of the actual document, and on the side we have the comments that we can put.
Okay. It's that comment box that's important because that's where you're going to paste that URL. And then the student knows that all they have to do is copy and paste that back into a Chrome tab and that they can get back to it. One thing about that is that it does expand. I hate the way that it defaults, and if I write something on it, people sometimes can't see my comments because they've got it shrunk down. Just look for the extend bar because it's right there. You can see it in that speed grader. If you have problems, I know I'm going to be answering a lot of them, so don't worry about it because this is the first writing artifact for the semester. So I know it's coming. Don't panic. How what?
How many writings?
There's one per module, and there's 4 modules per semester. Now that's the writing artifact, and what you're doing in between that doesn't mean that you're not writing. You're still writing, but you got to practice first. I mean, it doesn't make sense to make you go play your first football game unless you've had some practices beforehand. So now I will tell you this: the grading, the way I grade, is the first draft will get a rubric score. That is not chiseled in stone. I will give you feedback. Your peer will give you feedback. You go back through, you look at the feedback, you make the revisions according to the feedback. Then you will submit the revision. The revision is its own grade. It is not regraded according to that rubric. If you want it graded to that rubric, which I'm sure you will once you improve it, you just submit it back to first draft. This draft, if you look at the rubric, you see that in order for you to get the full points, the revision includes most or all of the recommended revisions from the teacher and the peer review. If you simply submit the second draft that you wrote in the first draft, do you know how many points you're going to get? Over here, 10. 10 out of 25. Guess what that does? It not only lowers the grade on the essay on that, it also lowers the grade on the full first draft because it's sucking in the points. You have to do the revision. Now, there are those who are very good writers. Here, I believe you're one of them. I think I did this to you once. I can't remember. If your first submission is so good that I can't find anything wrong with it, then if you submit it in that second draft, I'll give you 23 out of 25 points. Now, what's the fairness of that, you say? What is the fairness? Tara, do you know what the fairness of that is?
So people have a bit more trouble.
You should be able to look at yours and say, you know what, I can do this better. And you make a change. If you initiate a change and I look back at it, even that, well, if you make it worse, I will notice. But no first draft is ever perfect. Stephen King will tell you that. People's second drafts often aren't that great either. Revision is a constant process.
And how many revisions can you make?
As many as you can in the semester.
So until you get to grade more?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's exactly it. And so what you'll do is once you get, if the first time you revise and it's significant, you'll get the 25 points there. Then you resubmit it back in the first draft. I'll grade it again to the rubric. If there's still something that needs to be adjusted, and I make that, then all you have to do is resubmit it there. You don't have to put it back in the revision. You already have the high points in the revision. Okay? And like I said, anytime during the semester. So I've had students who their writing has improved by module 4, so they'll go back to module 1. I see how I can make this essay better. They revise it there. It counts. It counts. In fact, what you want to do, and I'll put out the instructions to this, your grade book right now is set to first quarter, which is fine because that's where we are. When we get to second quarter, you're going to need to open up the grade book to all grading periods. Because in my class, I don't do 40, 40, 20. It is 100% all 4 modules. So you can raise your grade back up at any time. Your grade is totally in your control.
There's no final.
There is no final. The only sense of a final is that when we get to module 4 and you have that essay due, there's no time for there might be a revision. I've got to remember if there was time for one. I think for you guys there isn't. And so there's no revision. So you're kind of getting graded on that draft. So that's the only
Would
final.
there be like early submissions for that? Where you could do it?
If you're in there, if you can get it done in time, yes. Yeah. The course closes by Canvas at midnight on Tuesday, December. Let me look. It's the day before campus finals. So it'll close the 17th, midnight of the 17th. You won't even be able to see the class anymore. It'll be gone. So, but the content will end somewhere in here. So you do have a couple of days wiggle room there too. Okay?
That's the day before my mom's birthday.
Ah!
And the 19th is my nephew's birthday. So.
They must love having their birthdays the week before Christmas.
Actually, yeah, well, my nephew doesn't know what that is yet. And he's 3, so.
That's a good thing. Although there'll be a visit to Santa's lap, won't there?
Yeah.
Okay.
But my mom told my sister, she was like, you should have pushed harder, so he was on my birthday. You did try hard enough.
Okay. Are there any questions about anything we have gone over?
Yes.
Sure.
This is because I have not done the one thing previously.
Okay. Let me close to that. So you're asking about a specific assignment number?
Yes, 13.4 to 1.3.1.
I don't know what happened, but somehow we had Kevis did something and got rid of all of our classes last year, and then since then, even if I try to tell it to keep signed in, it won't.
Yeah.
Are you guys having that same problem?
Yeah.
Hate it.
I just turn off my computer like all the way while I'm signed in, so it loads back up to switch 12 pages.
Remind me again of what the assignment is.
1.3.1.
That doesn't tell me what the assignment is.
Oh. Considering the writing task first draft.
Okay, that was this here, wasn't it? Isn't this the first one? The first question?
Yeah.
Okay.
She haven't done.
Go ahead. Yeah, and Haley and Sunai, do you guys have any questions?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm good.
Good. Okay. Thank you for joining us, and you guys can log off if you wish.
Thank
Yeah. Was there anything you needed to go over?
No.
Okay.
I feel like
Okay. All right. What's your question?
Yes. I need help. Number 7. It says create a thesis. While we're going over this, I forgot what the thesis is supposed to be on. And I read over this, and I'm not very good at this. I'm good at everything else besides the beginning and end.
Tara,
Thank you.
do you want to help him with the thesis? You're welcome. Thank you, Justin.
Hey, I know this.
What was yours?
You keep me on the spot, and I'm just.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, we did go over this,
Yeah.
and you did give me
it's
one.
Just to
Well, I
say,
did.
like, who do you agree with, who do you not agree with? Like, do you agree with the main point of the article?
What are you putting out? What the?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that help?
I think I got it wrong first, too, so it's okay.
All right. I'm going to close this out. So.